Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Overmars, and I work with the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. It's my pleasure to welcome you to another session in a series taking place during Nova Scotia Human Rights Week. Since 2023, communities throughout Nova Scotia have been invited to join in this week-long celebration of human rights from December the 3rd to the 10th. Presented by the Human Rights Commission in partnership with human rights champions, community-based organizations, and government, the week's events highlight the foundational role human rights play in protecting each person's right to live free from discrimination and the powerful force of a collective effort. This session will highlight accessibility project funding available to Nova Scotian businesses and community groups. With the built environment regulations now enacted under the Accessibility Act, this session will share supports available to communities to remove barriers to inclusion for people as customers, students, community members living with disabilities. You'll also hear from past successful applicants and the experiences they've had. Before I pass the mic over to Paul and Kayla from the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, I'd like to share that with deep respect for the Mi'kmaq people, the Commission acknowledges that we are located in Chubuktuk and the unceded ancestral territory of Mi'kma'ki. This land is covered by the sacred peace and friendship treaties signed with the British Crown in the early 1700s. We honor the profound historical and spiritual connections of the Mi'kmaq people to this land, where their ancestors' legacy endures. As treaty people, we are bound by the promises made in these treaties, guiding us in mutual respect and reconciliation. We commit to working together in harmony with respect for the Mi'kmaq people, their culture, and their rights. Again, thanks to everybody that's signed up to attend this session. I'm really excited to hear from Paul and Kayla and others. I'll hand it over to Paul now to begin. Thanks very much, Paul.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. It's a great opportunity for us to spread the word of this fund that we're going to be talking about today. And so we have two funds. We can see it on the screen, the Business Accessibility Fund and the Community Accessibility Fund. And so we're going to go over the two funds. We're going to have people talking about their experience being a recipient of the funding and what it's done for their organizations. So I'll be starting this off. So it all starts with Nova Scotia's commitment to accessibility. And back in 2019, we started to give $1 million to both the business and the community. So that's about $14 million in investment in disabled projects, accessibility improvements. So we work at the CCTH under the Community Sport and Rec Department or division, but we are guided by the Accessibility Directorate. So the Accessibility Directorate is in charge of the strategy for us to become an accessible province by 2030. And they, even though they're in a different department than us, we work very closely together. They help do reviews. They help shape, say, the policy of it. They give feedback on trends. I can think of back when the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission decided to make new restaurants accessible. That was a big decision. And so any new restaurants have to be accessible. Any restaurants that were bought that were vacant for a year or more beforehand had to be accessible. So that was a big change. So the accessibility director came to us and said there'll be a lot of restaurants applying for this because it was a big change. And we were able to absorb that and kind of look out and help people through that new process. So that's just an example of how we work with them. So yeah, we're going to be going through the demand and the different types of organizations that apply, the kind of accommodations that we give out, and it will all be pretty top level, and then we'll kind of zero in on one of the projects itself. So I'll just advance our slide here. So these are the two funding streams that we have. So the community and the business mirror each other. So it's really the eligibility, which is the only difference. So obviously businesses are for profit, and really everyone else goes in the community accessibility fund. So to be eligible, they have yeah, you'll see it on the next slide, but it's really anyone who's registered with joint stocks, is a PPSB, a prescribed public service body, and what there's churches. So really, if anyone has an idea and they're wondering whether they should do it for their organization or facility, then we can look at that. And it's not just built environment, even though about 85% of our projects are funding automatic doors, ramps, bathrooms, paving pathways. Those are like the top four. We also do other audio, vision, sensory. There's all sorts of projects, accessible websites. So we'll get through it. So we just opened up our program this Monday, and the deadline to apply is February 14th, 2026. We fund 2/3 of the expense if you're awarded the funds, up to a maximum of $50,000. And to give you a little example of the growth, the increase in demand, you can see the years on the left, and then in parentheses is the number of applications that we get. So back 3 years ago, it's already doubled since then. So we're seeing a big increase, and I think it's just, yeah, there's so many reasons to be accessible. The people on this call will understand that, it's legislative, it's the right thing to do. I find the driving force is these community groups have someone in that community that is disabled, and they can see it and they want to help. And that's really the positive kind of thing that we like to see. And it's all for the good reasons. We expect to see another increase in demand coming up this year. And these are some of the other organizations that are eligible to apply. So it's got the churches, community halls. We have the recreation facilities. It could be anything, golf courses. Then we have social enterprises. And then we have underrepresented groups, equity deserving groups there. And what we have here is the blue line is the amount of money that they were asking for, and the orange shows the amount of money that was given out. So there's a big gap there. And obviously, more money might help that, but we are really focused on the money that we have. And with the intake process, we're going through pretty rigorous application where we want to see that our dollars are going to be used for good accessibility improvement, and that it's going to be built to a standard. So in the application, it kind of asks you questions to make sure that you know what those standards are, and that you can complete the project and you're capable to do that. So that's what we want to see, is most of our projects done in the fiscal year of the year that they were awarded. So yeah, I think we'll kind of move on to the next slide. And this is where I get to introduce Michelle. Michelle, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Michelle Mahoney. I'm the accessibility officer at the University of King's College. You may also see Ian Wagshell's name along the oh, there he is, presentation slide. I invited Ian to attend, to accompany me today, because it's all about collaboration, and I wouldn't have been able to do, we wouldn't have been able to do this without each other. So he's here too. So but I'll speak on our behalf. So, today we're not just celebrating a renovation, we're celebrating access, dignity, and belonging. So thanks to the funding at our gymnasium at King's, I probably should tell you, we received the funding for our University of King's College gymnasium. And thanks to this funding, our facility now has automatic doors at the entrance, automatic doors leading into the gym, an accessible ramp into the gym, inclusive seating, and a fully renovated barrier-free washroom. What was once difficult or impossible is now welcoming, safe, and independent for everybody who comes through our doors. One of my colleagues in athletics got a call about a year ago, and a woman said that they want to come and watch their child play basketball, but the husband is in a wheelchair. And Trish, my colleague, said she was so excited to say, we can accommodate you because our facility has automatic doors, we have accessible seating, and accessible washroom facilities. So this project was simple, effective, and truly low-hanging fruit. And this impact is truly valuable. I really, really want to thank Paul Tingley because I had him come and do a walkthrough beforehand. I had him come and see the final results. I made sure our president and Ian and all of his crew that did all the work were there to see and to show Paul what was done. I'd like to recognize the importance of first voice consultation and advising. It made this space better because the most important voices help shape the outcome. And this is what inclusion in action looks like, and it's only the beginning. So here is our gymnasium entrance. On the left hand, the picture is before the door, and on the right is the afterwards is the door, and it's we have the bollard over here. I'm pointing with my mouse, but obviously you can't see that, but there's a bollard with the accessible button attached to it just on the right hand side, and when you push that, both doors open. So next slide, please, Paul. And then here, the picture on the left-hand side is the vestibule between the front doors and the gymnasium door. And the picture on the right is what we did after. So the two accessible buttons on the left side, and then there's a little ramp leading into the gym floor on the right. Next slide, please. And as you can see on the left, there was a really steep ramp getting onto the gymnasium floor. And then the picture on the right-hand side, we have a new ramp leading up to the floor, as well as you could see the bleacher area. And there's space there available for a wheelchair to sit as well. And the accessible button as well is a big elongated button. Next slide, please. And here is the bleachers. The bleachers can be pulled out and back in, and there's seating availability for wheelchair users as well. Next slide, please. This is our vestibule between the gym floor and the accessible washroom. So the picture on the left is beforehand, and the picture on the right is the work afterwards. Again, a little bit of a ramp in the middle picture. There's a little ramp getting up to the gym floor, and on the right-hand side, you will see the accessible door into the washroom. Next slide. This is actually the floor plan. I didn't have a beforehand picture of the work that we did in the washroom. It was a two-stalled washroom. So you can see in the green photo on the right that there are two stalls there. You come out of the stalls, there were two sinks. And now the next slide is going to show you what our accessible washroom looks like afterwards. So we removed both toilets and we kept the one toilet. The picture on the left-hand side, we have the two drop-down grab bars as well as a grab bar on the wall. We have a open roll toilet paper, which is my most favorite thing in the entire world. And we have accessible buttons. In the photo on the right is another view of inside the washroom. There's an accessible button on the left to lock, highlighted in red. There's an accessible button on the right, and that has green. But I had an interesting conversation yesterday with somebody about for visually impaired, how do we, we need to do better, and we need to come up with ways so that people with visual impairments know when a door is locked and unlocked. So anyway, again, this was so exciting to be a part of this project, and I was so glad that we received this funding and we're able to do these upgrades. It really is wonderful that we have people that can come to our gymnasium and successfully watch a game and use our washroom facilities. It's just so exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That's awesome. Now I think we'll keep going over to Kayla.
Hello. My name is Kayla, and I work for the Department of Community Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, and I am the program officer for the Business Accessibility Program. So there on the screen there, you can just find my name, my phone number, and my email address. So you can feel free to contact me at any time if you have any questions regarding to the Business Accessibility Program. Next slide, please. So just to give a little introduction or overview to the Business Accessibility Program. So this program is a cost-shared grant to businesses for accessibility related improvements. So I'll cover some examples later. So it's not 100%. And we cover 2/3 of any accessibility related improvement and up to a maximum of $50,000. So this grant is in alignment with the Accessibility Act, and Nova Scotia is committed to an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. We also, as Paul mentioned, work very collaboratively with the Accessibility Directorate, and they help us score all of our applications. They serve on our panels, is what we call them, to like score all the applications. And they help us with all of our recommendations at the end. And we also have a $1 million budget. So to be eligible for this program, you just have to be operating in Nova Scotia and you have to be registered with the joint stock. And the most important thing is you have to be in good standing with the Registry of Joint Stocks. You just have to make sure you're not revoked or you're not in the process of getting registered. And basically that's it. And as long as you have any sort of accessibility related improvement that you're looking to do to your business, you'd be eligible for. Next slide, please. So some examples of just some improvements. So the biggest one and the most popular one is the built environment and accessibility certification. So that is ramps, accessible bathrooms, automatic doors, openers, and accessible parking and pathways. The next example is accessible communication and information. So accessible web design, accessible signage, and assistive technologies. Another example is assistive devices, so movable equipment, page turners, adaptive switches, and voice recognition programs. So just an example of that is last year, so our 2025 deadline, we gave funding to a tour group, that's for Citadel Hill there, and they got headphones for the hearing impaired. So anybody that was hearing impaired that wanted to listen to the tour guide but didn't want to be right next to the tour guide and wanted to stay with their group, they could put the headphones on and they could listen to the tour guide as it was going on. Another example is accessible transportation. So converting or purchasing a brand new wheelchair accessible shuttle service vehicle. So that is becoming more and more popular as well. So a lot of taxi services and cab companies are looking to convert their current vans or purchasing a new van into an accessible wheelchair. And also a lot of senior shuttle services are also looking to apply to this program as well. And the last example is the universal design capacity building. So that is trainer fees, resources, hosting costs, and promotions. Next slide, please. So just to give an overview of our last year's deadline, so the 2025-2026, I had around $1.8 million in asking with a $1 million budget. And from 2024 deadline to the 2025 deadline, the demand for this program has gone up by 80%. So it's highly overprescribed now and very, very popular. And last year I received 65 applications. Next slide, please. So just to kind of give a visual overview. So within our department, we divide Nova Scotia into 6 separate regions. And when we give our recommendation for funding, we just try to make sure that it's proportionate and fair all across the regions. So I just presented a table here just to kind of give you a little bit of some statistics there. So for the central region, just say the total number of applications we received. Oh, back there. Thanks. The total number of applications we received is 18, and then we recommended 8. For the Valley, we received 17 to 11 recommended. Fundy, we received 3, total recommended 2. South Shore, we received 10, recommended 7. Cape Breton, 11, and we recommended 5. And then Highlands, we got 6 and total recommended 5. So just in total, like I mentioned, we received 65 applications and we were able to successfully fund 38 of them. And like Paul mentioned, our program is now open. So our deadline is February 14th of 2026. So that's a Saturday this year. And right now, me and Paul are on calls with people, discussing people's projects, making sure they're eligible to apply for the program, and preparing all the applications right now. So I am now going to turn it over to Corey Melanson. She is with Sea Change Collab, and she was a successful BAP or Business Accessibility Program, BAP, recipient in the past. So she's going to talk about her experience.
Thanks so much, Kayla. So my name is Corey Melanson. I am the principal consultant at Sea Change Collab. So we are a small 5-person business, a consulting company based in Jabuktuk in Halifax. And we have actually successfully received the Business Accessibility Program over a couple of years. I think before the program was in big demand, we found out about it and have used it for a variety of things. I think the thing I really want to share for anyone out there who's thinking, oh, great, great program, but what are some of the details? I would say one of the biggest positives of this program is you get about, correct me if I'm wrong, Kayla, but about 80% of the funding up front or 60? Yeah.
So if you're over a certain threshold, which is $25,000, you receive 80% up front and then 20% after.
Yeah, so it's different in many ways than other like grant programs in that you have the money and you don't have to sort of spend it and then be reimbursed. So that's a really, really key thing about this program. And whoever designed it, I think, was really thinking about the businesses and the community organizations who didn't necessarily maybe have that money up front. So through Sea Change, we have a program called Accessibility Confident Employers. And so we've really used the funding to amplify this program. And the program is all about building the capacity of organizations and employers across Nova Scotia to really increase their knowledge, their skills, their confidence around being able to implement all of the, accessibility standards. But before, as someone mentioned, I think it was Paul at the beginning, only one of the standard areas, the built environment, is actually enacted in Nova Scotia. But there's so many others: transportation, education, information and communications, employment, and I'm missing one. Can't remember. But all of those will be coming between now by 2030. So many employers, many businesses, many nonprofits will really need to know some of this information. So we aim to kind of build that capacity. Flip to the slide. Yeah.
The other one was goods and services, I think, Corey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's always one that I miss. So those, will be rolled out over the next number of years in the lead up to 2030. So this program, what it has really enabled for us, I say multi-year support. I just want to be clear that we've applied each year in the last couple of years. So it doesn't offer, as Kayla and Paul talked about, it's an annual program. What we've been able to do over the last couple of years, first, we really looked at that stream that was around kind of universal design. So we did some training workshops with businesses through the Chamber of Commerce, through our own networks, and we were able to really start talking about what does accessibility confidence actually mean? What are some of the foundational concepts that employers and organizations in Nova Scotia really need to be considering. Another thing that we've had success with is our podcast. So we're actually just releasing season 2, and the podcast is called Accessibility Allies. So we interview accessibility leaders. For example, Jeff and Michelle and Paul have actually all been on the podcast to really share their stories and really focused on the areas that we're working on in Nova Scotia. So employment, looking at neuroinclusion, looking at recruitment, hiring, retention, career development, as well as, what is sort of the state of accessibility in Nova Scotia right now. So you can listen to the Accessibility Ally podcast or read, because there are transcripts as well, anywhere you get your podcasts. So we're releasing season 2 right now, and we just kind of wrapped the recording around that. The other thing I want to share is that we did a complete website rebuild. So here we have a project that focuses on accessibility, and yet we were getting feedback from employers, organizations, and community members saying, you know what? This is great information. Of course, my dog's going to start barking now. I'll let her in if it becomes too much. But this is great information, but your website isn't fully accessible. So for screen readers, for mainly for that, I think we had, and we tried to ensure that we were doing everything we could, adding the alternative text, really looking at things like headers. But there's a lot in the design and development. And certainly when we first developed the Sea Change Collab website a number of years ago, accessibility wasn't front of mind for us. And so what this funding enabled is for us to create a kind of unique website, accessibility confident employers, that is fully accessible. Can you flip the slide? So I just want to go through kind of each of these programs in a little bit more detail. So some of the types of audiences that showed up to the free training workshops were like employers, certainly that's quite broad, HR teams, municipalities, community organizations. So a real range. We really try to focus our work generally on employers. That includes for-profit, public sector, and impact or nonprofit. We tend to see a pretty high percentage of public sector organizations, mainly because they're mandated to create accessibility plans, have accessibility committees, and to be updating those plans and really building capacity and skills. About 25% of our audience tends to be nonprofit or impact sector, and then a smaller percentage, about 18%, tends to be for profit. So I know that this will change over time as the standards are enacted and as more employers across the province really begin to understand not only the legal part of it, but also the impact of really having accessible everything from communications to goods and services. So some of the core themes we talked about, as I said, is accessible recruitment and hiring, workplace inclusion, and really practical tools. So really thinking about things like tip sheets and scenarios, that sort of thing we've kind of built into a lot of our training. And you can flip. So the podcast, really the purpose is to learn about accessibility through more of a storytelling lens. So as we know, there's lots of statistics out there. There is a lot of training as well. And as someone who comes from kind of the learning and development field, I I find it hard sometimes when information and training is just not, super engaging. So I'm a visual kinesthetic learner. And I really need something beyond just text, for example. So the podcast is based in storytelling, whether that's a story about an organization and some of the things that they're doing to increase, retention of people with disabilities, or even personal stories that people have told. So we've covered everything from the human rights remedy in Nova Scotia to um, talking about plain language and the importance of it. So it's really quite wide ranging. We've had over 1,200 downloads from our first season, and mostly the audience has been in Nova Scotia and then across Canada, with some in the US. And we, sorry, and then I would say the other thing that's I guess that's, yeah, really great is it's just a different way for people to learn and to kind of take information in. So we try to really share a range of audio, text, video in all of the work that we're doing. And you can flip. So we're really super excited about this accessible website build. Again, as I say, we're doing accessibility work, and here you can see our amazing team. And we all have lived experience with disability and intersectional experiences as well. So I would love to actually, Paul, no, it's all good. What I would say, I would highlight a couple of things on this website. So please go to the aceproject.ca. You can see there is a resource hub. And in that resource hub, it is searchable, and we include our resources, but resources from across Nova Scotia, Canada, and beyond. So we have hundreds of resources in there, everything from tip sheets to first voice videos to training programs. So many things. You can search by topic. You can search by language, English, French, and ASL, American Sign Language. You can also search by theme. And so that's really, really important. I know one of the things that's coming out of some of the standard development is to have something like a place that's kind of a one-stop shop where people can, organizations, individuals can go to learn more. So that's what we're really aiming to create there. ACE training. And so over the last 2.5 years, we've built about 15 different training modules, and all of those are free, online, and self-paced. And so you can click on that and sign up for a training at any time. We're pretty proud of our completion rates. So a lot of online training, honestly, it's quite what do I want to say? I want to say it's a little bit disappointing to know that out in the world, and I'm guilty of this. I sign up for online training and I don't complete it, but average completion rates are somewhere between 12 and 15% for online training, and ours is closer to 40%. So, happy that we've had hundreds of people, actually thousands. We've trained more than 3,500 individuals over the last 2.5 years. So we do that training. We also provide monthly skill builders that are virtual and synchronous. So we come together for 2 hours and there's a range of topics. In addition, we do some in-person events a few times a year. If you want to flip. Um, right. So this really talks more about the online resource hub. And as I said, we have guides, so plain language guides, checklists, short videos, created really with input from deaf, neurodivergent, and disabled communities. So as Michelle talked about, the principle of nothing about us without us. Um, all of our trainings are developed, co-created with a range of people with disabilities and also other intersectional identities. And we work very closely with the Accessibility Directorate and other government departments. So, for example, recently we launched a training on unconscious bias, and we worked with the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism to really ensure that there's consistent language, where there's consistent messaging, consistent definitions, so that Nova Scotians and Nova Scotian employers are really getting, accurate, but also Nova Scotia-based information and not needing to take that information from, other Canadian sources. We have a very unique um, province from the range of, equity seeking and equity deserving groups, historic Black communities, Mi'kmaq communities. And also, we have the highest rates of disability in the country. And so, really, really important to ensure that whatever we're creating is not just informed by, but really co-created by people with lived experience. Um, we really tried to design so that employers can quickly find what they need and make those practical changes right away, which is why we do checklists and guides and tip sheets. And, again, that idea of consistent accessibility practices really across sectors and putting those resources all in one place. You want to go to the next slide? What I want to say is just sort of the impacts across all the projects that we've done over the last couple of years is really that increased employer capacity. As I say, we've trained over 3,500 individuals and over close to 600 across 600 organizations. And as you can feel the momentum, you can feel the shift and the change. And it's really, really exciting to be able to tell the stories of impact through the Resource Hub, through some of our training, but also through the Accessibility Ally podcast. And to be able to tell those stories from a broad range of intersectional identities. I think that might be my last slide, but feel free to. Oh, no, look at that. I have another one. Michelle was so all lined up with all her slides and what this means for Nova Scotia. It is all about more accessible hiring pathways, obviously more accessible physical spaces, more accessible communication, better support for employees with disability, and really that long-term system change. And the word system change is one of those words that we throw around a lot. And systems are really made up of people, right? They're made up of people, processes, and policies. So those three things really um, feed into system change. And so what's exciting about, I think, this program is that it really has big impact on people and then process and policy. So that shift in where Nova Scotian businesses and community organizations are amplifying accessibility across the province is really exciting.
Wow. Thank you, Corey. That was amazing. I love that last little bit about how the systems change and really we're all here to do the same thing and we play our little part. And then it's great for the commission to bring us all together and talk about this and amplify it. So thank you, Michelle and Corey and Kayla. And these are the contact information for the programs. And maybe Jeff, if you want to take questions or have anything you want to find out
Paul,
more about.
yeah, thanks so much, Paul. Would you mind reading out the contents of the slide?
Yeah, of course.
I'll
The Community Accessibility Program is Paul Tingley's the program officer, 902-233-8379. And then the email is accessibilitygrants@novascotia.ca. And it's important to note that the accessibility is ACCESSA Bility. So it's not normally how you spell accessibility. And then we have the Business Accessibility Program with Kayla Arsenal, 902-220-8812. And this one's SB Access at novascotia.ca, which is supposed to be small business access. But yeah, we take all business sizes.
Thanks so much for that, Paul. Folks are encouraged to drop questions in the Q&A or in the chat right now. I'll just draw attention to the chat for those that are on the line. I dropped some links in during the presentations. I apologize to the presenters if that was at all distracting, but all of the links pertain to the topic being discussed. I dropped in there link to the accessibility standards that are being developed under the Accessibility Act. As mentioned, there are 5 standard areas that will become regulations under the Accessibility Act before 2030. And so when the province has indicated that we're working towards creating an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030, what that means in practical terms is that by 2030, there will be clear regulations enforceable under this piece of legislation that will provide clear standard and guidance to employers and prescribed public sector bodies across the province. And so the built environment is the first standard that was enacted, and that outlines man-made, person-made built spaces throughout the province, public areas, public spaces, buildings, and so on, as a complement to the building code. The other areas are, as Corey mentioned, were education, employment, goods and services, and information and communication. And so, with those standard areas being very clearly defined within the Accessibility Act, residents and businesses and communities across the province know that there are regulations coming within the next 5 years. And so now is a good time to be considering projects that you would be planning to undertake in the next 5 years, because as both Paul and Kayla indicated, both funding streams have seen significant increases in applications over the last number of years. Logic would suggest that those numbers are going to continue to increase between now and 2030 and beyond, as more and more businesses and communities recognize that there are obligations that they're going to need to attend to as it relates to removal of barriers for inclusion and access. And so now's the time to review the criteria. I've posted links in the chat for both the community stream and the business stream. And I just want to note that, Corey, the information that you've provided through the Accessibility Confident Employers, those resources really can act as inspiration and ideas for folks out there in terms of what they can be doing to remove barriers within their municipalities, within their communities and businesses. I think folks can really dig into the aceproject.ca website and see, possible areas for collaboration with community members and opportunities to put funding applications together between now and February the 14th. I think pulling your applications together and submitting those to Paul and Kayla between now and the 14th of February will give you access to possible project funding that you can undertake in 2026. And so I think that the projects that you've highlighted, both Paul and Kayla, through Michelle at the University of Kings and through Corey with the work that she's been doing, I think that's just a jumping off point for folks to consider the projects that they need to start thinking about ahead of the 2020-30 standard deadline for regulations to be enacted, because accessibility standards for websites, for public spaces, for businesses of a certain size really take advantage of this funding now, because the competition is going to be growing stiffer and stiffer over the coming years. I'm just looking here in the Q&A box, and the question that's been posted is, just appreciate the panel. Question: how do you ensure inclusivity in remote or hybrid work environments? Corey, I'm wondering if that maybe is not necessarily related to the specific funding topic, but as someone who's invested such time in the ACE project, is this a topic you could speak to just briefly and possibly direct folks to where they might learn a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I'm happy to at least start here, Jeff, and then other people can certainly jump in. I think a lot of things in terms of information and communications doesn't really matter if you're in person or remote or hybrid. So, accessible websites, accessible digital documents, accessible social media, all of that is really, really, really key, whether or not you're in person or remote or hybrid. Certainly, one of the things that we know is that with the opportunity, I want to call it an opportunity, to have flexibility in our in hybrid work environments, that can actually be a real kind of bonus, in particular for people with disabilities. Um, there are flexibility is one of those accessibility approaches that really meets a lot of different needs across a range of disabilities. Um, so it's great that this idea of like, okay, if even if it's part-time, remote, or hybrid, that can really go a long way. Um, I think obviously if you're hybrid or remote, still having that, physical accessibility and ensuring that you do have an office space kind of set up that meets your needs is really important. But yeah, I think the information and communications piece is the key that I would see to that. Do others want to add there?
I what I heard out of the question maybe was more about the rural applications. Like we look at equity when we give out the $1 million, and we have the different regions, and there's a lot in the city, and of course they're more sparsely as you get out into the rural areas. So we look at all the equity, we look at our money available, and we try to spread it out in the province and and we know the rural won't have as many quotes maybe, and it's doesn't have the numbers, but it still matters to those people. So the quality of the experience. So we're definitely aware of all that. So I think we do a good job of using our money. We look at not only the regional equity, but the types of accommodations. So whether it's for mobility or sight or hearing as well. And then if there's underrepresented groups and they can show that they have the funding available, then they definitely kind of get an extra nod by our panel to look at the past injustices and try to start making amends for that as well.
Thanks, Paul. I think,
Jeff, if I
yeah, Corey,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things for people who may be thinking, I don't know. There's a couple of things I've learned from being a grant recipient kind of in this program. One is that what's really great is I think Paul and Kayla, again, tell me if I'm wrong, but you post the recipients each year
Yep, they're up
and
there
you
now.
can get a bit of a summary of the project. And so if you're thinking, oh, this sounds really great, but I don't know what to do, go to the websites and really look at what have organizations been funded for in the past. Um, and the second thing I'd say is obviously built environment is really, really key. And with the legislation that's been enacted around the built environment standards, that's probably going to continue to be an area where people will apply. But also thinking beyond built environment as well, like as we've talked about, goods and services, training, communication. I think the other thing that took me by surprise the first time, and I don't know if this was your experience as well, Michelle, but you apply February 14th, but typically it takes till maybe May to learn about whether or not you receive the funding. So I know, and you'd think I would have learned over the last couple of years, but then I'm like, yes, we're going to start our project in April, and then I'm emailing saying, so when will we find out? And that's because of the rigorous system that you Paul and Kayla, that you have developed, and I know it goes up to senior leaders. So just maybe the expectation of timing, right? So you might get the funding in May. That's when you're signing. You're very good at sort of the funding comes soon after that, just a couple of weeks. So really be thinking about a project that's doable from like June to November is what, because you're trying to do it within the fiscal year. Is that right, Paul and Kayla? Or
Yeah,
or does the fiscal year go to the end of March?
the
Please.
March. Yeah, goes
March.
to March
Okay.
31st.
So I guess one thing to just be aware is if you're applying in February, just don't think that you're going to be, starting April 1st on your actual implementing the project. So this is just, it's good governance, it's accountability, all of that from the part of government. But sometimes there are other programs, like for example, I applied to Invest Nova Scotia as a business. I typically hear 2 days later. So it like all programs have different timelines, and this one has a particular timeline that is I think is important to share and know about.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. I'd say that's the biggest feedback. People aren't aware, like we do tell them, but there's a lot to know. So it does take like they have their end date before we even announce funding kind of thing. So then we have to readjust the whole thing, but we get through it. And we meet people where they're at. Their circumstances change. We're able to give extensions if need be. And so go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, Paul. We also got an extension because we were waiting for our parts to come in for our accessible doors. So thank you for the extension. But just to I guess follow up to what Corey was speaking about. I think with the increase in applications every year too, like that's probably gonna give you a lot of work to do, Kayla and Paul. But also, and not to put you on the spot, but like, how do you make those decisions? How do
Yeah.
you decide who gets the funding, and is it in most need? Is it in I would really, I don't want to say hate because it's such a harsh word, but I'd really hate to be in your shoes to have to make these decisions on who gets funding and who doesn't. I mean, it really we are so grateful, and just the impact that this has done for us with our gymnasium, and people talk about it. And I ran into somebody in Dartmouth last a couple of weeks ago, and they asked me what I did, and I said I work at accessibility at King's, and we got talking about the gym, and they said, oh, it's all accessible now. You guys did that? And I'm like, yeah, I was part of that work. And that was just like, so it's the icing on the cake for us to to be able to highlight that, and for people to, in the general public, just to see that. But yeah, I mean, I really I'm really curious how that works.
It's a lot of reading. There's a lot of overtime in those months. And so we do have a scoring sheet, a rubric based on the barrier, how severe the barrier is to limit participation. So we want to get rid of those barriers, make sure that the applying organization has the capacity to pay their 1/3. They have the capacity to like do the project. So that's based on maybe past projects. And then we have a bunch of people that are reading this. So we kind of just, you're scored, and we basically have the final score. And then we just give out the $1 million till it runs out. And it's really hard because there's a lot of good projects that still aren't funded. And yeah, that's the toughest part of it. But the good news is we're funding $1 million worth of good stuff too. So.
Thank you.
Related question, Paul, and this is with my community member hat on. As organizations are considering applying for funding, do your offices, Kayla and Paul, do you have a sense of contractors, vendors, folks that are out there that are able to actually do this work when it comes to the practice of sort of retrofitting or making change to the physical environment, or web programmers, website developers, and the like, who are proficient and skilled in completing these projects in a way that you can be sure that the outcome meets the desire of removing those barriers. Do you get a sense that there's
That's an excellent point
enough
you bring up.
people
So
out there?
no, we don't have the exhaustive list of all the good, and also we have to be careful. If we name people, then you're excluding others, and then it could be favoritism and things like that. So it's but we want the money to be, done correctly as well, like invested. So we do like push button door operators. I can tell you like so many from all across the province. And when there's people calling up, I'm in rural Nova Scotia, where do I begin? I'm able to give a couple starting points of, past projects they passed in. It was like successful. It was a good job. I feel comfortable, kind of like this is just a start kind of thing. But we're not saying like, I mean, I tell everyone to go training with Corey, but she's like unique, I would say. But for like construction and everything like that, we are working on educating the Construction Association, those people doing the work. We're trying to do little resources so the applicant can share the information with their contractor, because there have been pictures of the final product and you're like, really, this is not what we talked about. And you can tell the applicant as much as you can, but it's the contractor who's actually putting it all together, and how they learn about the newest accessibility standards is well, I'm still working on how to make that a better process, I guess. But yeah, that's something that we're looking at, I guess, all the time.
Thanks, Paul. And back with maybe my professional hat on, as somebody who's contributed to the development of the employment standard and is chairing the Information Communication Standard Development Committee. I do know that education is a significant sort of deliverable coming out of that process in order to educate the general public and those professionals undertaking this work. There is an education process that's required, and I guess this is maybe planting a bug in the construction industry and the contractor field, is that this is a growth industry, for lack of a better word. And the more that you can educate yourself and your crews and in the processes that are, coming your way, but in terms of work and potential projects, being able to demonstrate uh, work that you've done in this area and meeting a certain standard of accessibility, referencing the building code again when it comes to the built environment, but then again, looking at some of the web standards and other best practices that are showcased on the ACE project website. I think that the more that we're developing the education material around what the expectations are, the better that the professionals that are out there doing this work can meet those standards. So, yeah, a really
I
interesting
see
wave.
I see Ian's got his hand up, and he kind of led the project.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
just quickly because we're at the very end of the time. But I think that a really fast way to get to where you want to get to in that problem is get first voice talking to the contractor while you're designing. So have someone who's going to use the space has a disability, and have the contractor and those two people talk. You won't believe how much better that works. Because the contractor will say, well, where do I put this? And say, you put it here. Oh, we put it here? I didn't think of that. And you have that simple conversation. We had this yesterday with Sawchuck, who was
With
saying,
Julie.
Julie, and
Yeah.
she was just saying, boom, I just talked to the contractor, you got the handrail on the wrong side. It's just a conversation. And if that conversation happens early, especially while you're making the application and they're working with First Voice when they're doing the design work and therefore pricing it, I think you'd be much better, you're much more likely to get the finished product you're looking for.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in, Ian, and for being here to make that important point. This is an opportunity to plug the Accessibility First Voice roster that has been compiled by the Accessibility Directorate. If folks visit accessible.novascotia.ca, there's information and resources available there, including a first voice roster of individual Nova Scotians living with disabilities who have identified themselves as being capable and interested in sharing their lived experience to help inform just this sort of project. And there is funding that the Accessibility Directorate has identified to ensure that these folks are compensated for that time. So you're able to enlist somebody with that first voiced lived experience, but then also not expect them to just be volunteering their time to help inform these projects. So it's a nice complementary offering. And again, we are just at time. So I want to thank everyone here today, Paul, Kayla, Michelle, Corey, our ASL interpreter, Shane, everybody that's tuned in. There's so many sessions that have taken place and are taking place until December the 10th around Human Rights Week, a number of them touching on topics around accessibility and inclusion. So I encourage folks to visit humanrights.novascotia.ca to find listings for additional events, and the recording of this event will be posted there within about 24 hours. So unless there are any final parting words, I just wanted to say thank you once again to everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, folks.